Joining us, one of our very favourite Liberal National Party senators, Senator Amanda Stoker, joins us from Queensland. Great to see you, Amanda. How are you?
Good morning. I'm really well. It's great to be with you.
OK, now we want to talk of Albo's. Will you be glued to the television this afternoon as Anthony Albanese launches the Labor Party, the socialist alternative for Australians if they want to go down the path of having the state-owned part of your house? Amanda, what did you think of this news about this, the state's now going to give you money and own part of your house?
I think it's really dangerous. What we know from hundreds of years of observing the way different governments work is that governments don't deal very well in parts of the community that are better managed by the market. They're better able to adapt to local circumstances. They're better able to meet the needs of the wide range of different things that people in our community are looking for. The idea that people might be beholden to a government for their most core type of financial security, that is their own home, is, I think, a little bit dangerous. It's also vulnerable to exploitation, and I actually think it's a really dangerous path to head down in circumstances where what we need to be doing is making sure we have the supply necessary, driving that at the state government level, and making sure that we've got the settings in place for people to be able to make good choices about what they want to save for and be able to realise that. Making sure the government has the strings on everybody's personal investments, I think, is really quite worrisome.
Rita.
Well, what do we do about that issue? Because it is a state issue and it is a simple supply and demand issue. It is difficult to build housing in Australia. It's expensive to build housing in Australia. So what can be done to make more houses available for people who want to buy them without these socialist-style schemes?
It's a really good question. I mean, I think the first thing we need to do is to have some accountability around state governments that refuse to do what's necessary to make the aspirations of regular Australians to be able to get into their own home harder than it should be. I think we also need to be realistic about the role that layers and layers of government regulation play in making things too expensive. If we simplified many of our environmental regulations, not in a way that harms the environment, but in a way that makes processes faster and prevents them from being subject to decades worth of appeals when really, oftentimes you really only want to do something rather simple. Those sorts of things would have a significant impact on bringing down the cost of housing. But at the federal level, we're pulling every lever that's available to us to make sure people are able to get in despite state government stonewalling. And that means we've put up the Home Loan Super Saver Scheme, where it makes it easier for people to be able to save up for their deposit. We've provided support for people to get through the barrier to entry that can sometimes be paying mortgage insurance and helping them through that early spike at the start of their mortgage where that can be prohibitive. And we're making sure that there is the possibility of people to keep building those new homes so that at the federal level we're doing everything we can to drive supply. Labor talks a lot about social housing and affordable housing. That should always ring alarm bells because that's code for swathes of homes in this country being owned by government, when the right way to do it is to put in place the mechanisms for the very smart and very capable people in all the different parts of this country to do what they do best, and that is to build what the market wants and provide it to them in a price point and in a style that suits those conditions.
Absolutely. James? Yep, sorry.
There's a program called NIFIC in Australia that's about helping with that.
Yeah, Amanda, I just want to shift gears for a minute. Here in Sydney, we've had a lot of talk around the candidate for Warringah, Catherine Deves, a Liberal who we've had on this program many times. She's been campaigning to preserve the integrity of women's sport. The attacks on her and her campaign have gone viral around the country and indeed around the world. I sat down with her yesterday. We've got a big profile of her in tomorrow's Daily Telegraph. And I am just wondering, are people up there tuning into this debate about transgenderism in sports, protecting women's sports, and the way that women who stand up for the integrity of women's sports are treated, particularly by the left activist class?
I'm not sure that they are switched on as much to that last point, the idea that people who dare to express a traditional or conservative view are whacked much harder than people who might either be conspicuously silent or take the contrary position. But there is definitely a sense in our community, particularly from people who have been, a little bit shy to say so in a public forum, that this issue has gone beyond the point of tolerating people who have different challenges. It's gone beyond showing compassion to people who struggle with their gender. And instead, it has become about taking away all of the things that were achieved through decades of work by women to see recognition of the different but equal things that women contribute to our community. Being compassionate and kind to people who struggle with their gender does not mean we have to abandon our understanding of basic biology. It does not mean we have to abandon common sense. And it doesn't mean we have to take away all of the reasons for encouraging our young women into competitive sport, because of course it wouldn't be fair if they were competing against a biological man with different bone density and different muscle density with which they could never compete. If we want to have healthy, strong women, we need them to be engaged in sport. And this has consequences that range from women getting broken arms in the AFL game at the weekend right through to disincentivising the kind of physical activity that keeps women healthy throughout their lives. And it is enormously dangerous for that reason.
Now, Amanda, I'm going to embarrass you hugely and watch you go red on live television by saying that, as far as I'm concerned, if I were in Queensland, I would be ignoring the Liberal Party's how to vote cards and I would be putting you number one on the Senate ticket, Matt Canavan there as well. We need people like you in Parliament, so I'll be talking about this more later. Queensland deserves to have you. Australia deserves to have you. Just tell us how you're going in this campaign and your thoughts on my idea that we should put you number one. Below the line.
Well, I could only ever encourage people to support the Liberal National Party. There's a lot of good reasons for doing that, but can I say, Rowan, I very much appreciate your friendship and support. You and the other outsiders have been very good to me in the 4 years I've been in Parliament. But there's a really interesting choice that's faced by people in the Senate here in Queensland, but around the country. I know there's people, particularly on that centre-right side of politics, who have been frustrated for various reasons with politics and government over the last couple of years. I really do get that. But if you have a protest vote with some of the minor parties of the right, you do two really bad things. The first thing we know is that when you have a flutter with a minor party of the right, you might feel good in the moment, but what you actually deliver, statistically, is the greatest likelihood of agreeing. And I know that's the worst possible thing for this country. So even though people might want to go with a minor party that tells them everything they want to hear, even though they could never possibly deliver it, there is that massive risk that by doing so, what you get is the worst of all possible worlds. And that is another Larissa Waters type in the Senate. The other thing to say is that if when you get frustrated with government, you decide to act out that frustration in the Senate, you actually gut the major parties, particularly the LNP, in which I very much want to see a good intellectual rigour. You gut them of the people that are the solution to the problem. And so if you want to see the major parties strong on the things that you care about, then it doesn't make sense to send your support to a minor party that can never deliver on the things that you want, and as a side effect, take away the influences in the Liberal National Party that are most likely to help your views get heard. So there's a really interesting conundrum Queenslanders will face, but I do hope that as they face the reality of the challenges our country faces, and they are real, our economic recovery is in its early days. Much needs to be done to ensure we are prosperous and strong on that front, and that economic strength is vital to secure our defence in a time when our geopolitical position has never, in the last couple of decades, been less secure. If we can't get that right, our strength as a country, our very freedom and integrity as against the rest of the world is on the line. And I have zero confidence that Mr Albanese, in coalition with the Greens, as they set up coal moratoriums and shut down your jobs and take away the sources of Australia's economic strength, they just don't have the ticket to do it.
Amanda Stoker, always great to have you here on Outsiders. There you go, Queensland. It's up to you.